when my children are out and about.
There are stats to back up this fear. Black Americans are 2.5 times more likely than white Americans to die at the hands of police. Police use of force is the 6th leading cause of death for young black men. Minneapolis police used 7 times more force against black people than white people over the last 5 years. Such force includes kicks, neck holds, tasers, and takedowns. Heavy-handed police tactics were used to suppress recent protests and enforce curfews.
The early roots of American policing begin within the context of slavery. Before the Civil War, African Americans, particularly those living in the U.S. South, were enslaved. One of the things that developed throughout various parts of the South was the creation of slave patrols.
Slave patrols were made of white volunteers. They would stop, question, and punish enslaved people caught without a permit to travel. They used vigilante tactics and terror to deter slave revolts.
Well, the white volunteers who joined the slave patrols felt empowered to control the lives of black people. And this is where we begin to talk about how whiteness functions within the historical lens.
Then came the Reconstruction era after the American Civil War. It's during this time the U.S. starts seeing organized and uniformed police officers. By the end of the 19th century, all major U.S. cities had police forces in place.
They are made up of predominantly white men, and they are functioning in a very similar way as the earlier slave patrols, in that they are continually targeting black people. By the time we get to the early 20th century, within the context of the Jim Crow South, what we see are police forces actually making it possible for white vigilantes to murder black people, to lynch black people, rather than arrest people for acts of violence.
The Civil Rights Act of 1964 ended segregation on paper, but uprisings triggered by acts of police brutality continued, from the urban uprising in the late 60s to the LA uprisings of 1992. Violent policing of African Americans persisted. Then, in 2014, a police officer fatally shot 18-year-old Michael Brown in Ferguson. That galvanized the Black Lives Matter movement.
The movement certainly brought the issue of police violence to the national spotlight. They will talk about how activists organize on the ground. I think the current moment is very much a part of the larger narrative of the Black freedom struggle.
Let's be blessed together right now with Pastor Byron L. Broussard.